All right, guys. So joining us today, we have my beautiful friend Bodhi, who is a dear ally of mine, and uh, yeah, so he's been doing this pretty much his whole life, and so I just want to introduce you all to him. And Bodhi, if you wanted to share anything, if there was anything that you would like to share with the audience today before we get cracking on some questions for you.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, Leah, and I just wanted to say that I'm so impressed with what you're doing, and the recordings that you've made, and actually fasting. It's not an easy thing to do in our day and age, especially. And I'm just really impressed with what you've done. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. I didn't expect to gain so much from it, actually. I thought it would be easier in some ways and harder in others. And yes, it's just created so much for me in my life in such a short
Nice.
period of time. Um,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
you've jumped right in.
yeah.
I mean, without knowing that much, you're just like, yeah, I'm doing Ramadan. So yeah, really, really well done. And yeah, if anything that I can help with, any questions that you have, I'll do my best to answer them.
Yeah,
And and share whatever I can.
great. Well, look, why don't you start with telling us a little bit about your background and the part of Islam that you are coming from and the history there and a little bit about your childhood as well. So then we have a bit of a broader picture of where you're coming from, and then we can probably go into it a bit further from there.
Sure. Well, I was born in the United States. My parents were both part of that sort of hippie generation that was seeking to escape from the very materialistic 50s and 60s America, and were looking towards the Eastern philosophies, as well as being part of that generation, whether it's Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, and all of those contemporaries of my mother and father. And so I was born in Northern California. They met in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. So they're very much part of um, that movement, if you like, that time period. But by the time I was born, they were living in a commune, in intentional community, as they're called now, in a hand-built tiny home before they were called tiny homes, and moved towards India. Then my parents never got to India actually, but I grew up mostly in Europe. And then when they separated over a disagreement about the spiritual teacher, my mother eventually ended up with a European Sufi community of Muslims in England. So I grew up, from my earliest memory, really, as a Sufi Muslim, um, and have lived all over the world uh, since then, growing up mostly in Europe, but spent many years in South Africa, and traveling and back in the United States as well, and for the last 12 or 13 years in Australia. And although I grew up as a Muslim and very much identified as a Muslim, Sufism is kind of more the esoteric side Islam. And but I don't identify as what most people would know as Muslim or Sufi, because I actually think that we live in a time that is post those labels.
Mm.
I consider myself Muslim, but don't identify as a Muslim because, as we may get into, the meaning of Islam is might be a little bit distinct from what most people understand as the religion of Islam. Um, so some people might have some opinions about that, but I'll do my best to explain to the extent that you want.
Right. And so with I suppose it'd be really great to understand sort of perhaps the difference between like a Sufi culture and then could I say a classical Muslim culture or
No, the Sufis were always Muslim. There's although there is now sort of a movement of sort of more mystical. Um, so Sufism has been connected with mysticism, but these are all our human distinctions, if you like. Um, as you know, our tendency as human beings is to start to identify with a way of doing things. But a lot of this is about doing, about what you do and you don't do, and your behavior outwardly. So you could say that religion in general has helped people or has helped to form cultures and societies and guide them in terms of their social interactions. But we know that the purpose of those interactions and of doing things correctly and appropriately is the our inner and our being. So the doing is about the being. So you could say that that people see Islam as a religion and as a cultural, and that's, I guess, maybe the difference that you're talking about. There's the culture of Muslims, and then there's Islam. Islam, to me, is the natural way of living, not because I do things in a certain way, but because we've been created a uh, in in a system, if in natural flow of life that works. So if you're living in unity with nature, with your inner and your outer connected, with your behavior subject to an inner guidance system, if you like, an inner GPS, then you are living as a Muslim, as our in Islam. So, and Islam and the word itself kind of it derives from the word that means peace. Salam is peace, uh, but you could say kind of in harmony, living in harmony with a natural way of being. Um, so the guidances around outer, do's and don'ts are all based on the situation and appropriateness. Uh, but to try and answer your question, Islam as a religion and as a culture is a way of life that it follows the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. But Abraham was considered to be the first Muslim, if you like. So Islam is part of that the Judeo-Christian religions of the Abrahamic tradition. Um, uh, and Islam is a synthesis, if you like, of those religions, and also a lot of influence from the Eastern cultures as well.
Yeah.
Sufism is more the esoteric side of Islam. You could say it's a very oversimplistic way of speaking about it. But from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, there were always people who were interested in the essence and the essential nature of life and living and of those teachings that he brought through the Quran, the revealed book of Muhammad. But there's so many similarities between the revealed books and the traditions of many cultures and Islam. You could just say it's an updated version.
Yeah, well, we all need to develop and grow and change as a collective and individually, right? So
Yes.
totally makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about the you know, it's not about like the do's and the don'ts of what we're doing. It's more about the way of life that we're choosing to be in, which yeah, it's a philosophy that's been really important to me. I mean, in my early 20s, I sat with many different teachers from many different religions as I sort of went on a journey traveling around the world to understand more, because I grew up in a family that was very Christian on one side, and then a little bit like, oh, like we're going to church because we kind of have to on the other side, on my mother's side. And it was interesting observing that, and then being placed in a Christian school at one point, and then really just watching this, like this forcing of a belief and a way of being which just felt so against the grain of our natural state of being, when I could see that the underlying message was all around peace and how to live in a peaceful way and how to serve one another, and in it the sort of the basics of how to be a good person as well.
Yes.
And as I started traveling and I wanted to understand more about all of this, I started to realize that all religions are really just a guideline for that. And then you just kind of choose your flavor, right? I mean, these days we have the privilege of being able to choose. But a long time ago, it would have been wherever you were born was where you would place yourself in that spectrum. So yeah, it's quite interesting that you speak of that, and that Islam itself, there's a window or a platform of Islam that really offers that, which I just think is beautiful. And since all of this began, it's like this secret world has been opened up. And every taxi driver I have had since this has started, except for one guy, which was great because I just needed to rest that day because I was really feeling the Ramadan edge, when I was pushing through some deeper layers of myself. But yeah, it's like, yeah, even the taxi drivers who weren't practicing Islam, but maybe their wives were Muslim, or they have a lot of friends who are Muslim. And so it just sparked these incredible conversations about God and this energy that is all around us. That is God. We are God. And getting to the understanding from these other cultural perspectives that are connected to Islam, to the Muslim faith. And it's just really blowing me away. And also how accepting of other cultures and religions and ways of being they are. And they're just quietly doing their own thing in the background. Um,
Mm.
and then like seeing the looks on their faces like, oh my god, this white girl is just like doing Ramadan, what the hell, you know? And so then like you can't shut them up. Which has been great because it's been just like it's like something just took the lid off of the whatever it was that was keeping a container on them and creating this unseen separation. Suddenly that vanished. And
Yes,
it's like, okay, like there's no cultural separation. We're just people now sitting in this vehicle together having a really good discussion.
exactly.
Yeah.
The sort of football supporter way of looking at identity and tribe around religion is really beside the point. Once you get underneath the core purpose of these ways of living, the idea is the being behind it. It's the being. It's our being, not all of the doings. And of course, that is very much what Ramadan is about. It is about recognizing and practicing limiting the outer so that the inner aspects have an opportunity because we're so dominated by our outer sensual um, uh, modes of interacting um, with the world. So it is very much about exploring these inner aspects of life, and on those everybody can connect.
Mm, yeah. 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 Under the surface of everything, it's just another layer of that oneness, isn't it? That we're all a part of.
So, did you have any specific questions about Ramadan?
I've actually had I do. I've actually had a few people asking me about does the word Ramadan translate into anything in particular? What does the
Uh,
word Ramadan mean?
right. So actually, the correct thing to say is the month of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan is the ninth lunar month of the Islamic calendar, which is a lunar calendar.
Yeah.
So about 10 days, around 10 days shorter than the solar calendar. Um, the root of the word or the meaning of the word itself, there isn't a huge consensus on that. Most people would say that it means sort of heated or baked or scorched. Maybe because at the time, although it travels through the year because of because the lunar calendar is shorter, it'll go through all seasons. Maybe it was this is a desert language, Arabic. But interesting that kind of scorching or that burning is kind of what happens inside our bodies as well with fasting. You kind of burn off toxins and burn off the excesses and almost sort of so fasting has been used in many ways in all cultures and religions, and some as atonement or expiation for wrongdoing or for saying things or when you don't have anywhere of any other way of atoning for things that you limit yourself. But whereas in some ways in both in the Abrahamic traditions, especially in Judaism and Christianity, fasting was almost inflicted on the self almost, as a punishment, as an atonement.
Mm.
Um, it's not that in the Islamic tradition, although there are different. Yeah, fasting is just to limit the outer, um, in it, in order to gain the inner, in a sense. So you can fast from not just food and drink, you can fast from speaking. And so in the Old and New Testament and in the Quran, there's those, it speaks about Zechariah, for example, who is told not to speak to anyone for 3 days, or uh, 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 Mary, mother of Jesus, is told to refrain from speaking, in case she is uh, asked about the strange nature of her pregnancy. So it's fasting can be from many different things, but the meaning of the word itself
Yeah.
is unclear. But it's a month of the year. So are you people will ask me, are you doing Ramadan? What they mean is, are you fasting during the month of Ramadan?
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Because yeah, like when people are asking me, that's what I say. I'm like, I'm doing Ramadan right now. It's just like I'm doing this as part of my schedule.
Yeah.
Which really,
There
when you're
you
using
go.
that language, it's just like it's completely opposite to what you just said.
Yeah, I'm doing January. I know it's March, but I'm doing January.
I'm so doing January right now. I'm doing the crap out of Ramadan right now.
There we go.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. And so, like, in terms of eating and stuff, I mean, I think because, this is my first month doing it, it I don't want to use the word slapstick. It's more like I'm eating with intention. And when I've spoken to, some of these cab drivers, a lot of them say, oh, yeah, we'll have these mixed fruits and then we'll have a little bit of meat and maybe some soup or something like that. Um, so for people who are thinking about perhaps participating in Ramadan next year, in terms of the approach to food, when in the beginning process, maybe leading up to Ramadan also, and the types of foods, the keeping in mind the vitamins and minerals and proteins and sugars and all of the things. Do you have any advice for that, or even if you just wanted to speak to what is traditionally uh, eaten during that time?
Sure. Well, look, the again, in terms of the culture of Muslims, the funny thing is that, well, it's not funny, but the interesting thing is that the food anxiety goes skyrockets. Sales of food in Muslim countries goes up. People find a way to gain weight during Ramadan, in some places, rather than really practicing the meaning of Ramadan. So for you know, so that there's the health benefits of Ramadan, which are to do with sort of emptying out the body. The idea being that if you have a clear body and mind, and steady emotional and mental state, that will give you access to the inner realms, of 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 knowing and of connecting to the inner senses. So people go to town in Ramadan and have all kinds of traditional stuff that they eat, but I don't prescribe to that at all. For me, and with recent studies that have been done on fasting, whether it's intermittent fasting, so you could say that Ramadan is a type of intermittent fasting
Yeah.
because you're eating during night hours, or when the sun's not up, and not eating or drinking during daylight hours. And as you probably know, uh, the liver, you'll live off of the liver's stored glucose or energy for about 18 hours. So most, it really is intermittent fasting.
Mm.
So I'm on the second day now of a liquid only fast,
Okay.
um, because of the latest scientific research shows that if you can get into autophagy, where the cells are actually really cleaning themselves, then the benefits of fasting just go up exponentially.
And so
Um,
what does autophagy mean? I'd like to know this. I'm sure there's a few other people who.
Right. So there's a process in the body that when your stored glucose resources are used up, the body switches over to eating or fueling itself from the stored energy sources. And you know the body starts to release ketones after about 12 to 14 hours, I think. There's wonderful podcasts and information on this from Huberman Lab and a number of others. There's a great book uh, called Fast Like a Girl, which I found very interesting, the introduction to it at least, in that it is specific for women, so that tailoring what they eat and drink, and fasting and exercise based on the hormonal cycle of a woman, at different ages and so on and so forth. And um, so I fast from the perspective of the more scientific sort of approach.
Yeah.
So I would say that if you can start to reduce your over, what would you say, processed foods in the lead up, it will help a lot. If you can reduce your intake of toxins, the detoxing is going to be so much more pleasant, because
Yeah.
it can be quite challenging to detox, especially from things like caffeine and sugar. So that's one thing to think about, is to reduce your caffeine intake, which I didn't. I went cold turkey and suffered the consequences.
Oh.
But I did reduce sugars, refined sugar intake, that is, and just general carbohydrate intake, reducing bread and so on and so forth. So preparing the body so that so that you don't feel awful. Uh, but the other thing is that once you are really in the fasting stage, once the body is starting to consume its fat reserves, and very interesting, once the fats that the body will start to use are the sort of organ, the fats that sit around the organ. Um, the organs that's the fat that gets used first. But of course, what the body does with toxins is it stores it in fat. So as the fats get used, these toxins get released as well. So it's a very good idea to hydrate and make sure that your um, um, electrolytes are balanced. And a lot of people don't eat or drink too much
Yeah.
in the morning, but it's a good idea to hydrate unless and if you're doing a water fast, so a customized fasting is the way you're not eating any food at all, which is what I'm doing at the moment, and only drinking liquids or water. Um, um,
Feeling?
so eat it. Sorry.
How are you feeling doing that? How's that all feeling in the body?
It again, so you go through another level of detoxification. But once you're into that, that body consuming internal energy sources, you feel great, steady.
Mm.
It slows you right down. Everything slows right down as you're getting into it. Um, but yeah, and once the toxins are out, and as long as you're flushing those toxins out, feel great.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh, maybe I'll take a page out of your book on the last couple of days, actually. Just ramp it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm hoping for 5 days. Because after 48 hours, like there's 48 hours and 72 hours. There's well documented changes that happen in the body and the resets in terms of all kinds of things, whether it's the hormonal system, whether it's the neurogenesis, the production of new neurons,
Mm.
and this flushing out. Autophagy is the flushing out that the body does the cell at the cellular level, where you're getting rid of old dead cells and also accumulated gunk inside the cells. So the cells themselves actually clean themselves out, and you get a tightening of skin, um, which is pretty amazing because the collagen systems reset. So there's all kinds of resets that happen at these key uh, um, uh, points of fasting: 24, 48, 72 hours. I mean, it's not exactly those, it's gradual, but um, so yeah, and apparently, uh, uh, for people who are generally quite healthy, and that's a very key thing here. Fasting is only for when we're talking about fasting, we're talking about fasting for adults
Yeah.
and for people who have general good health. If you have weak kidneys or other specific health conditions, you need to fast under especially these longer fasts and these liquid only fasts, water fasts. You need to do it under advisement of a doctor or your medical advisor, because it for most people it's very easy, a 7 day water only fast. Once you get over the detoxification and you have reserves, and we all have reserves, then it's actually quite easy.
All right. Sorry, everybody. We just got cut off. But yeah, so Bodhi, you were saying about the fasting and then getting to the point where you start to feel energized as
Yeah,
opposed to feeling tired.
yeah. Well, about some of the health benefits, I just quickly looked at some notes that I'd taken about that. And these are some of the benefits of fasting. Reducing the risk of cardiovascular disease and coronary artery disease. Reduces the risk of metabolic syndrome by decreasing triglycerides. Helping the body to fight cancer. There are some specific protocols for fasting for people who have cancer. and who are going through chemo for cancer as well, different protocols. Reducing the risk of heart attack and stroke. It increases the production of HGH, human growth hormone. Um, Promoting optimal cellular health and autophagy, which uh, is the cellular cleanup process whereby the healthy cells get rid of the cellular waste products and dead and damaged cells. Helping the body defend from oxidative stress, which from free radicals. Reducing inflammation, one of the key drivers for many underlying health issues uh, is inflammation, um, including obesity, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and certain cancers. And then the stimulation of neurogenesis, as mentioned, increasing longevity. That's all. These are all from studies and papers, published papers. Reducing insulin levels, and all of the benefits that that has, and increasing metabolic rate. Um, so whether it's, weight or anything else. Um, and so yeah, so those are some of the physical benefits,
Mm.
if you like, of fasting. Um, the other thing that there's a few others that your senses become a lot more sensitive, whether it's taste, like there's like a reset of your taste buds, which is really interesting. You probably noticed that your sense of smell is, gets very, very sensitive. You can smell if somebody's smoking in the car in front of you. It's ridiculous. Um, um,
But it's also
I
beneficial
think,
too, like you walk past like some flowers in somebody's garden or something.
yeah,
Sometimes I've just stopped and just gone, oh my gosh, like it's such a euphoric experience. You can feel those scents going so deep in the body as well. Like there's this
yes,
deeper
yes.
response to pleasure that comes from through the senses.
Yes, and I guess so. And fasting is to withhold from that. So in the Islamic tradition of fasting, you wouldn't wear perfume. You would fast from smelling very strong smells. So food is not made with very strong spices as well. The idea is to really turn away from the outer senses in order to concentrate on the inner senses. It's interesting. It's almost like our bodies are almost tested, or like we're being tested, because your sensitivity to everything is heightened, but you still abstain from those, even though it's glorious.
And also on that note as well, I'd love for you to speak more on that. There's also sort of like the part that requests us to go within, almost without choice when we're fasting, because it just happens so naturally. Uh,
Yes, yes.
and the benefits of that, and perhaps somebody who's so new to this idea of of
Hmm.
going within, how does that look, how does that feel, what would one expect to happen through a process like that? And like I know sometimes it's not always easy to do that also. So yeah, if you could
And
anything you want to
yeah,
share or speak on, that would be wonderful.
I'd love to. I actually saw a poem written by a good friend of mine, Lukman Ali, from the Khayal Theatre Group in the UK, and he writes about fasting, thriving on the fullness of emptiness senses liberated from the craziness, identity denuded of the haziness, soul reset to timelessness on the dot of oneness. And then on another interesting post that I came across, was fasting, when done correctly and for the right reasons, does something to you that cannot be explained with human language, but we'll try. You become very aware of just how habitual the act of eating has become. Many of us do not eat for hunger, we eat for pleasure. Absence of perpetual pleasure seeking in all forms exposes you to the emotions you mask with your habits, and you are finally exposed to who you truly are. This is where the healing starts, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So this awareness and this sensitivity that to to who you are, where you are, what is actually going on, hopefully allows us to step back from our automatic ways of being, which is often just doing. And we live in a culture and a time where we're human doings. We're constantly acquiring and working and hustling and figuring and calculating the angles and the returns, and there's all of this doing, and we what happens with fasting is you don't have the energy. You just don't have the energy for all of that. So you're forced, in a sense, to just slow right down and to sit with hunger and with thirst and with that real, the reality of that just at a basic level. And once you go past that, you're back into your body rather than in your head. Once the noisiness of the monkey mind calms down, you're able to start to recognize who you're being while you're doing all of this running around. You start to reflect on what it is. Why are you doing that? What is the purpose? What is it for? So much of what we do seems to be in order for us, is about survival, even though we have everything we need. So, but because we're so obsessed with this survival way of being, we end up getting and doing much more than we need. We consume more than we need. We think more than we need. We have more than we need. It's just it's just too much, and we don't need it. It all becomes a burden on us. So the fasting is to show that letting go of all of that allows us to deal with what is real and who one really is, and exposes some really uncomfortable realities about our behaviors and how dependent we've become on our habits, on consumption, on distraction, on sensual uh, um, um, pleasures that remove us from the discomfort of dealing with what's actually going on. Our poor bodies are burdening, are under this this excess, like just trying to deal with it all. And you once you sit with the fact that you don't need any of that, like, well, you don't need that. You don't need the food. So why do you need all of the money that you're running after? Why do you need all of the stuff that you've accumulated? What is all of that hiding? What is it? What does turning away from all of that expose? That what you really need, and what people experience in so many different ways when they're out in nature and camping and hiking, is you need very, very little. And once you are in that state, then there's all of this space and energy to reflect and
Mm.
to process in the same way that our cell, at a cellular level, we can start getting rid of the junk that is actually killing us slowly. We can start to deal with some of this mental and emotional and spiritual plaque that is clogging up our beingness, if you like.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It feels like that's exactly what's happening. Like, um, yeah, there's been, it's interesting because my outer world has been kind of a bit flipped upside down during Ramadan. And, you know, whenever I'm talking to clients, we talk about uh, getting to see what our souls are truly made of by having the earth experience.
Mm.
But then Ramadan brings this whole other level to that, to see what we're truly made of as this physical form by having everything pulled away. And it's just you inside your body with, like, even just a simple act of having a cup of tea during the day for me was creating a pleasurable experience that turned me away from what I really need to be facing and turning to with open arms and walking towards.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so it's, yeah, yeah, you just explained it so perfectly, so beautifully. And thank you, because yeah, it's exactly like that, and it's an incredible challenge to face during this
It
process.
really is.
Yeah, and so for people who haven't had the opportunity in life to sort of do a lot of personal work, who might
Mm.
go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to give this Ramadan thing a go. In terms of perhaps support during a process like that, would there be anything that you would suggest
Yeah, absolutely.
for
Absolutely. So,
you?
everything that people are doing in order to support themselves, you do that. Whether it is meditation, whether it is sound healing, whether it is mantras, whether it is speaking to coach, counseling, the raw edges are exposed when we're faced with hunger. All of our lower animal tendencies are exposed. And if you, you want to talk to those taxi drivers an hour before fast braking and see how patient they are and how much road rage comes out. You can get, you just find yourself just getting, especially during the detox period, really snarly and just, but somehow you're more aware of that. I'm not sure if that becomes more or you're just more aware of it. And so companionship, like fasting alone is challenging.
Mm,
Fasting with others, buddy up, or if you can't be in a group, even better if you can be in a group. Um, Maybe time retreats or being away, being more in nature, will help tremendously. You know, so because you see the nature around you and how what's insulated from the realities of life we've become with these very sick, excuse me, secure, comfortable lifestyles that we live. And the reality is that we're hanging on air, and we're very dependent on food. And it can be quite shocking realizing how dependent we are on, on glucose. It's very humbling in a very beautiful way. So that can be confronting. So any support that you need, make sure that you have that available. Um, um, and fasting and doing all of this at the same time is like boot camp. You will you, coming off of sugar is like, I'm told, coming off of heroin. When you really do it, it can be really, uh, it can you can feel really rubbish.
Yeah.
So a couple of days, or if you're doing a water fast, like that first 24 to 48 hours can be quite challenging with headaches. And if you have excess weight or other health issues, but you're healthy enough to fast, the smells that come out of you, the once the digestive tract has had a chance to recover, and it starts to get rid of what it hasn't been able to get rid of, it can be quite confronting. What you've been walking around with. But for all of those reasons, I highly encourage it as well.
Wow. Yeah, great. Yeah, that's really, really helpful stuff. I mean, I was thinking about this during the processes that I've been going through, and it's like, wow, like if I didn't have my own toolkit to process this stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
it would be really crazy. Like it would be super difficult. And when I was thinking about it, and I've been receiving a lot of private messages from people going, hey, this is really inspiring. I'd love to know more. I want to understand more. Um, in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, there needs to be some form of a support network. I mean, traditionally that would be with your family or your spiritual teacher or whoever you've got.
Unity, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
during that
But
time.
we should do that. I have to say that I was so inspired and that's why I'm on this water fast. I think it's the True North Foundation, uh, but maybe we can make some resources available to people. But I was so inspired by the realities of the health benefits of fasting. Like we need fasting in our day and age, just as medicine. Like we need it more now than ever. So much of what people are dealing with, whether it's autoimmune disease, whether it's hormonal imbalances, whether it's even fertility issues, so much can be dealt with through fasting. And then the inner or spiritual or growth in personal growth benefits are are tremendous as well. Um, so I don't know. Maybe we have to get a sort of functional fasting group, or support group, or tribe going, for people, because it just doesn't only have to be during the month of Ramadan. It can be at other times as well.
Sure.
Um, yeah. So yeah, let's do that.
All right, that'll be exciting. Yeah, I'd love to do something like that. That sounds really cool. We'll talk about that a bit later.
Functional fasting. I like that. That sounds good.
Fasting, yeah. It's just breaking down the rules about the walls of our personal realities as well. It's
Yeah,
picking at the
exactly.
fabrication of what we think is true and really
Yeah.
looking beyond the veil, and yeah, and getting healthy as well. I mean, I don't know if you saw some of my earlier videos, but in
Yeah.
the earlier stages, you could see where my brain fog was kicking in, and the way like my speed, and I was watching it, and I think I even said to you at one point, it's really hard to watch myself because I used to be so sharp, and most of my working career has been around presenting things to groups of people or talking, and uh, now it's like I struggle to just get out like a couple of sentences some days. And now it's like this participating in all of this fasting has just cleared the cobwebs out of my mind. And
Yes.
yeah, I really want to continue with this and continue going into the deeper layers of my body, and just sifting through, because I mean, especially for people like myself, I mean, in my early, people don't know this actually, but in my early 20s, and as you know as well, I went through chemo and radiation in my early 20s because of cancer, and still when I've gone through various detoxing experiences, the chemo and the radiation has come up and out. Like during, I remember I did an ionic foot spa one time, and the woman was like, "Oh, have you done chemo and radiation? You look so healthy." I can't put the two together. And I said, "Oh yeah, very, very long time ago in my 20s." And she said, "Oh, you see these little black specks here and these colors there."
Right.
That happens when people have been through that. It's nearly 20 years ago now. And so
Amazing.
I was so blown away that that's still there after all those years.
Yeah.
So on the physical for myself, I think this is the next step for me as well. Um,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah, and it'd be great to create a supportive net for people to sort of follow
Yes.
through, that keeps everyone
Yes.
inspired and moving through the
Yeah.
month.
Yeah. No, that sounds wonderful. You know, what is that saying? You know, we're not uh, um, uh, humans having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that sounds good, but I think that fasting helps to really show the reality of that statement,
Yeah,
right? So, you know, because we're so consumed by our human experience that it's easy to forget that there's an entirely other layer that doesn't get a look in. And so people could just fast and benefit incredibly, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, from that fasting. And hopefully, though, it also that gives them the opportunity then to slow down and recognize that they're not who they thought. We are not who we think we are
yeah.
most of the time.
And that's where the
And
real work
exactly,
is.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, we're just clearing out the symptoms, right?
Yeah, and to make space for some different challenges that are there in order to tell us to wake up. Mhm. So we do want to combine both. By the way, I did want to say, because I'm not sure if I'd said it before, that there's a couple of things about Ramadan. Um, Even traditionally and in the spiritual traditions, that the 19th, 21st, 23rd, and for some people 25th are special nights where often people pray, meditate, or in states of reflection and contemplation during those nights. Because Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, is also the month that the Quran was revealed in its entirety in one go, like the light of it, to the Prophet Muhammad. So these nights are like they call it the Laylatul Qadr. One of them, not all of them, one of them. You don't know which one. You'll know during it, if you're sensitive enough. But one of those nights is the night of power, Laylatul Qadr, which is said to be the night that the Quran, in its essence, in its whole essence, holistic essence, was revealed. And so those nights are coming up. In fact, so in the Islamic calendar, the night comes before the day. So in our language, we would say today is Thursday and tonight is Thursday night. In the Islamic calendar, last night was Thursday night. The night comes before the day.
Wow.
Right? So the night turns into the day, not the day turns into the night. So tonight is, depending on which day people started fasting, is the first of the nights of power.
Wow.
And then for a lot of people, the last 10 days, it's almost like the 2/3 of Ramadan is preparation for these last 10 days, around 10 days of Ramadan, where you're dealing with kind of the muck and the detoxification and the physical aspects, so that you can concentrate on the inner aspects. So in the Sufi tradition, takhliya, the emptying out, is what you do first. You empty out. The ego death occurs, and then you have the sweetening, which is the diving into the inner sweetness, and the inspirations and delights that come from tuning in and tuning ourselves to those subtler spiritual, if you like, aspects.
Beautiful. Wow, I didn't realize that there were specific evenings as well that such a thing would be carried out. That's amazing. Wow. All right. So, is there anything else that you would like to share, or anything that you would maybe even like to share about what you feel the West could benefit from, sort of dropping those walls of separation between our way of living and their way of living, or living of the other, especially this separation between the West and Islam. I think there's been
I'm hesitant to polarize the West and Islam.
yeah.
But if I can say a more material, if we mean by the West a sort of more materialistic outlook on life versus the traditional, whether it's any indigenous tradition of understanding that that our purpose is to recognize who we truly are, and so our outer life, our engagement with work and family and children and cultures and society is not so for so many people that this life is about gaining security in and comfort,
Mm.
and that's the goal, security and comfort. And if that is truly the goal, and that is if that can be made conscious rather than subconscious, as it is for so many people, that's just the way that it is that you go and get a job and you work your whole life in order to retire comfortably. If people recognize that that's what they're doing, and then maybe they can start to ask themselves, well, what is that for? What do I want comfort for? What do I want security for? Because it's for something. And then if the orientation can be towards what that is for, rather than as an end in itself, then I think that we'll start to recognize that, or limit our overindulgence in whatever,
Mm.
overworking, overeating, overexposure, um, overthinking. I feel that if people can recognize that through fasting and through meditating, that there is this whole other level of reality that is really what is real. Like so for example, we see as humans, and all animals, we see things the way that they are in order to benefit most from them. Like all of our senses are there, tuned in order for us to survive
Yeah.
and to gain benefit, whether it's food, whether it's sexuality, whatever it is. It's about perpetuating ourselves, our DNA. And so if that's our animal side, but then what is that? What is that for? And where has this life force emerged from? What is that life force? And that sense of peace, once you have that outer stability, which is always temporary, which is always relative, and therefore great, no, get some comfort. You need some protection. You need to have the basic taken care of. But if as soon as the basics are taken care of, if you just continue the basics, we're never fulfilled.
Mm.
Whereas if we get the basics and then we recognize, okay, now that this is for going inward and gaining an understanding of who I really am, and then start to recognize what's really going on and how the inner and outer are seamlessly connected, and how the magic of what we call coincidence, and how, whether it's numbers or people or events, and then you start to flow with what's really going on and how things work, rather than just being in this basic survival mode. Then we're no better than the birds, as my teacher would say. The bird gets up in the morning, doesn't know where its food's going to come from, goes to sleep at night without knowing what's coming next. And we're better than that. So the promise of the the secure Western lifestyle is great, as long as then we use it to go inward.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's endless. It's just endless repairs, and to our bodies, to our houses, to our cars, to our relationships, to our workplaces. It's just endless.
Yeah, yeah. And then it's like, well, what's the point of being given these consciousnesses that seem to be bestowed upon the human race? What's the point in all of that if you cannot?
As if it's to make billions, right? So
Wow.
how do I monetize this spiritual experience?
Yeah. Great. Well, look, thanks so much for your time today. That was just so beautiful, and I'm really excited to get this out there and get as many people checking this interview out as quickly as possible, because we all need to hear these things, and it's so important. And yeah, just I really value you as a friend, and just I'm just really glad that we managed to make this happen today. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thanks everyone, and I hope it's of benefit to whoever needs it.
Yeah, my beauty will go well, and thank you so much. Thanks, guys, for watching, and yeah, we'll tune in soon. And oh, please remember also to like, share, and subscribe, and also hit the notification bell, because we are planning to have more of this kind of content in the near future. So thanks, everybody.